In this video, I'm going to demonstrate and show how the unwrap keyword works. Because it's actually crucial when you're dealing with Lambda objects that contains Lambda expressions. Now, first, let's open up MISC, and then let's go to the evaluator, and then let's create some Lambda object. Data, foo1, bar1, foo2, bar2. And then let's create another Lambda object, data2, and then value1, colon x, colon at, dot, data, slash asterisk, slash foo1. Value2, and let's just copy this guy. Now, if I just execute this now, then nothing happens really. Why? Because I have two data nodes, and the execution engine, the evaluator of Hyperlambda, doesn't read these data nodes or enter them in any ways to try to execute what is inside them. Now, let's use the unwrap keyword here now by pointing it to data2 with this expression, data2 slash asterisk. If you watch carefully down here now, you will see that in this version, the value 1 and value 2 are expressions. In this version, these expressions have been evaluated. That is exactly what unwrap does. Now, if I have a slot, let's say I have a slot here now. Let me create a slot, slots.create, colon foo. This slot wants to concatenate two strings, strings.concat, get value, colon x, colon at, dot argument, slash 0, then the second argument, and then return the value of this to caller. If I now execute this, I now have a slot that creates, that concatenates two strings. So I can now invoke my slot now by writing signal foo, and then I can write any argument 1, Thomas Hansen, and then any other argument was here. When I invoke this, of course, I get Thomas Hansen was here. Now, if I want to invoke my slot with arguments that are expressions now, let's say we have a data segment here, value 1, Thomas Hansen, value 2, was here. If I now point, instead of statically providing my argument, I point my arguments to dot data slash value 1. Let me turn this into value 1. And then I do the same with the second argument. What is actually happening now is undefined execution. You see, the signal doesn't return anything. Why? Because I am passing a Lambda object into foo. This Lambda object contains two expressions in each of its values. Inside of my foo node, foo slot again, I am concatenating two values. These two values are expressions, and they're pointing into nothing. Because when I'm inside of signal, then this data segment no longer exists. Why? Because this one is executed in a detached tree graph object, tree object. So what I want to do now, I want to do unwrap, colon x, colon plus, slash asterisk, which basically forward evaluates every single expression from the nodes leading to this expression. If I now execute it, you will see now, let me see why didn't that work. Like this, then now all of a sudden you will see that inside of my slot I now have static values instead of expressions. Let me just recap by commenting out this guy. Now it returns nothing. Now it actually works. So basically the places where you need to use unwrap is when you have a Lambda object that contains expressions that you want to evaluate before you're passing that Lambda object anywhere, then you need to use the unwrap keyword. Now with native slots, such as anything that you see here when you do control space, then the slots have access to the entirety of the tree structure from where you're actually evaluating this particular slot. Now with dynamic slots, this is not true. So the dynamic slot is basically a detached graph object that is executing in isolation, meaning without the unwrap keyword here, this expression here will point into nothing, because the data segment does no longer exist when I am inside of my foo slot and executing my foo slot. There are a couple of additional places where you also need to use unwrap. In order to demonstrate where, I need to open up tools and HyperID, and I need to create an HTTP endpoint. We can create it in tutorials, and we can call our endpoint tutorial04.get.hl. Then let's say we have a return. First we have a data node here, foo1 bar 1, foo2 bar 2, and then we are doing a return value 1 colon x colon at dot data slash asterisk slash foo1, and then we're returning also the second value here now. If I now just save this file and I execute it, you will see it returns null and it returns null. Why? Because when I'm returning my value here, then none of my expressions are actually being evaluated. So what I need to do, unwrap colon x colon plus slash asterisk, save my file, execute, and now it is actually returning the result of my expressions. So these are the basic places where you need to forward evaluate expressions. You also need to forward evaluate expressions when you're executing files, or when you're executing Lambda objects, passing in expressions. You might have to forward evaluate your expressions, etc., etc. And that is basically what the unwrap keyword does. It forward evaluates expressions. And if you click documentation here, you click the hamburger menu, you find magic lambda, you control F to search for unwrap here. You will see the entirety of the documentation for unwrap and what it actually does. It doesn't explain where you need to use it, but it explains how it works at the very least. So anyways, that was it for today's session.